Okay. So I want to just take a moment to say, first of all, how nice it is to see all of you. I hope you had a wonderful array of high holiday services. I know some of you were with me sometimes or more than sometimes, and other people had a smorgasbord of high holiday worship experiences. I hope they were all lifting. Welcome, Joyce and Megan. We'd love to see you. I'm going to press record. Oh, it is recording. Is it recording?
Was.
Now it's okay. Now it's recording. Here we go. So now recording's in progress, and I want to turn this over to my teacher and friend, Rabbi Lilly Kaufman. We, for those of you who know, we started cantorial school together in 1992, a long time ago, and we both became rabbis on a very different timeline. And Lilly is both has insights into Bible like no one else. Her Wissenschaft is very, very special to her, and she is a master teacher. So Lilly, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Marcia, and what a joy to see these faces. It's been a while, so I'm very happy to be with you. And I hope you had a wonderful Yontif. And I want to just do a few non-text-based things before we begin. One is, I hope you all just heard the news that 5 Americans were released from Iran. They were hostages. And it's just a powerful moment in American history. And I wanted to just express gratitude. Baruch atah Adonai matir asurim. Praised be God who releases those who are bound. So I want to begin with the bracha for studying Torah. And we're still getting people in. So nice. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to engage with words of Torah.
Amen.
Amen. So, Marcia, do I need to share the document again in the chat?
I maybe only one.
I've done it, and
did.
when people come in, I'm going to share.
So I'm going to be sharing my screen for most of the presentation today, but I'm not doing it to cut off conversation at all. It's a very visual-based, text-based presentation. So I will try to do it in a way that I can still see you in the corner strip there. But if you have a comment, please use the chat to alert me to it, and I'll try to keep one eye on that, or just interrupt me, whatever. We're informal here. So now I get to share my screen, and this can be amusing because sometimes you get to see my entire cluttered desktop, which no one should see. Okay. Done. Yeah. Oh.
Do you need help, Lil?
It's coming. Nope. See, that's what happens. Stop.
Okay.
Sharing. Do that one more time.
If you'd like, I can bring it up.
Can you? That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Actually, better at that. Okay. All
right. Hold on. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm going to share it right now. Here we go, everybody.
There we go. Okay. Okay, wonderful. So I'm just going to make sure I can move freely in this. Okay, I cannot navigate it, so Marcia, you're going to need to.
May
Okay.
I ask a question while we're setting this up?
Mhm.
Why do we go back to Genesis for this, the Torah portion on Rosh Hashanah? Because it's I just was thinking about that during services on Saturday morning.
So I want to see if there are any ideas in the group as to why these parshiot particularly. Because it's not so much that we go back to Genesis. I think it's more the choice of
The
these.
choice, is it simply because we're starting the beginning of the year? But then don't we start basically right around here on Simchat Torah?
I don't think it is. I think that the
Well, close to
the particular stories that we read on Rosh Hashanah are all about the first dynastic family of Hebrew leaders, and specifically about their family relationships. And they're not so easy family relationships. And so much of the work that we have to do on the high holidays is to repair relationships. So whether you're talking about a parent rejecting, abandoning a wife and child to the desert with limited resources, as Abraham did, or sacrificing his son in a way. I mean, these are the critiques. The critical way of reading those stories are also stories of faith. And what does it mean to have faith? And
But he also said that his son, who he cast out to the desert, will be the leader of a great nation. So this is something very, very important between Jewish and Arab relationships, our cousins, and we should know this and accept it.
Correct.
Both sides.
Correct. So, and this raises right away the difficulty of these stories, and especially the Akedah story. It is regarded for many centuries as the story of great faith of Abraham, and when obedience was prized as the sign of great faith. And today we struggle with that. And it's not to say Chazal, the sages of ancient times, didn't struggle with it. They did. But I'm going to shift our perspective to something else, which is a part of the story I have never heard a sermon about on the high holidays. And however many times I've studied this story, no teacher has focused on the end of the story. And if you've studied any literature, you know that one of the most important features of any story is its ending and what we are supposed to learn from that. And so I became curious about this ending, and specifically about what God promises about it. And I just want to move this up a little bit, if you could, Marcia, a little bit. So, wait, not that much. Okay, no, I need the text. No, we can only see that much. Okay, let's start with the text and move it as we need it. So, I'll read the Hebrew, and you follow along in either Hebrew or English. And you'll notice that I have played around with the visual presentation of this in certain particular ways. Vayikra malach Hashem el Avraham shenit min hashamayim. Vayomer Bi nishbati ne'um Hashem, ki ya'an asher asita et hadavar hazeh, velo chasafta et bincha et yechidecha, ki varech avarechecha, v'harba arbe et tzaracha, ki chochvei hashamayim, v'chachol asher al sifat hayam, v'irash tzaracha et sha'ar oyevav, v'hitbarechu v'zaracha kol goyei haaretz, ekev asher shamata b'koli. And what I want to focus on here is, you see, I've highlighted certain phrases in color in Hebrew and in English, and the colors are key to these citations in the middle of the page. These texts, all four of them, appear elsewhere in Torah. And so this blessing is a composite creation by God, God's greatest hits. And so there's something very intentional about how this was put together. Okay. So, any reactions to this text before we look at it more closely? Anything that surprises you? Anything that inspires you? Anything that troubles you?
This might be imposing the modern world on it, but and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of the heavens. Why then have we as Jews always been such under attack, and everyone, well, maybe I just answered my own question in my head. You know, our history is about war and being eliminated. But maybe that's God's joke. We keep coming back. I don't know.
So you may be reassured by this phrase in red: your descendants shall seize the gates of their foes. They may come after us, but we're going to win, right? That's what that says. Whether that is defensive, we're going to protect ourselves, or it's aggressive, it's not so clear.
But how do we come across this when we're all God's children? Everybody in on this earth, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish or not, whatever synagogue or church you go or don't go to, everybody is a child of God. So why is this the treatment of different people different? If we're meant to be the light unto the nations and we are stiff-necked people, etc., then we have to show that we actually believe in God and we're not the judge and the jury of people on this earth, but we are God's servants.
So there is an element here of triumphalism that is distasteful to some people, right? Why do we have to be at war all the time? I'll go you one better, not better. I'll just backtrack a little bit and say, wait a minute. This says in two different ways that we're going to be so numerous. We're a tiny minority and we always have been. In what way is this a true statement? If I look around me at the Jews, I'm just not seeing as numerous as the stars of the heaven. Now, I didn't think of this until this year as I was preparing to study this with you. But One way,
Maybe when when Mashiach comes, or the rebuilding of the temple, when we'll all be of one religion, then the religion of God, the one religion, will be as great as the stars in the heavens, etc., etc.
could be. But I think that this is a commitment that the Jews will be as numerous. And one way that I found to think about it is that, okay, we're never so numerous at any one time, but we are incredibly long-lived as a people.
But we were numerous, and it's mentioned in the Torah and the Haggadah during the time of Egypt, during Joseph's time, when we Peru, etc., when we grew to such an extent that we were frowned upon, and this is when the trouble started.
That's right. Well, we were numerous as a minority, but I don't think it ever claims that we became a majority in Egypt, even in that time. So, okay, what I want to do is move down.
Even if that Pharaoh was paranoid enough to think that we were so numerous that we were going to cause him trouble.
That's right. So Sylvia, do you have control of this document?
No,
Okay,
no, I don't.
let's move this. Okay, good. So I wanted to just show you, I found some illustrations online, free, copyright-free material to illustrate the stars of the heavens. And I especially like this image because of the human figure there in this position of joy, of wonder, of awe, just encountering the vastness of the universe with arms spread out. And I can't tell anything about this person. I can't tell their age, their ethnicity, their color, their religion, nothing. It's just a human figure. And I found a picture of the sands on the seashore. It's hard to find a picture of the beach where the sand is featured in the foreground. And this one happens to be a picture of Yerushalayim, but it gives you a sense of what it means to seize the gates of your foes. We're not talking about a little swinging gate on a, picket fence. This is a major fortified city of the ancient period. And I also brought an image of all the nations of the earth to show people of great diversity, of size and somewhat of age and skin color. And again, I happened to find a picture of people with their arms uplifted in kind of a sign of welcome. Now, if you look back at the text, you'll see what I've summarized here. This blessing quotes or paraphrases 3 blessings given to Avram by God in Parshat Lech Lecha from Genesis 15, 13, and 12. And it anticipates a blessing that will be given to Rivka, to Rebecca, by her brother and her mother, Lavan, and their unnamed mother in Genesis 24. And if you notice, God's composite blessing at the end of the Akedah story in Genesis 22 features the word Zaracha, your descendants, 3 times, 1, 2, and 3 in 2 verses. So this blessing is all about your descendants. And I don't know about you, but I am someone with no descendants. I have no children. I didn't come at this text to see how I could find meaning in spite of that, but as it happens, I did. So what I'd like to do before we turn to the next page is invite you to think for 1 minute, less, a few seconds, about which of these images and themes makes you curious, moves you, irritates you, you want to know more about it. And then we're going to look at the sources that are the parallel sources. Okay, let's go to the next page. Okay. So if you could move it down a little bit more. I don't need the introduction. I want to just see the text. Okay. So I invite you to take a couple of minutes. I'm going to time it and read through the text from the current blessing that we're looking at and the parallel text underneath each one, and see if you find meaningful comparisons or differences. So your time starts now. It's 1 minute, 1 minute to go. Okay, time's up. So if you looked at the stars of heaven, did you find anything that struck you particularly about this text? How does it enrich the blessing at the end of the Akedah? Anyone?
Well, for me, when I read that, and of course, then I read the one below it. I think if you didn't have one of those big microscope things, you couldn't really count the stars of heaven. And how many times as a child have you tried? Maybe you get 5 or 10 and you think, then you give up or you start repeating them because there's, especially in those days when we didn't have so much light pollution.
Right.
So I see that, and I see, and because of that, so shall your offspring be. That could mean anything, because if you can't count the stars of the heavens, how many offspring are you really gonna get? And when we know, as Isaac had 2.
So it's a little paradoxical of a statement in Genesis 15. Count them, what you cannot count. Why would God tell us to do something that we cannot do? This can't be done. And I don't think God is trying to frustrate Abraham or us. But I do think that there is some value in being aware of kind of deep paradoxes and saying and acknowledging that there is a universe of things we don't know, can't wrap our arms around, and yet we aspire to. We aspire to trying to understand it, to trying to grasp it or see patterns in it or something about it. So it's an attempt to convey to Abraham both the enormity of creation and reassure him that you just wait, you think you're all alone here, but it's going to be very big. You're going to be very influential. Your family is going to reproduce. Okay, anything about the next one? The sands on the seashore is the most, I think, obvious distinction of all of them. Anybody? Not, I'll just point out what I saw. Okay, your time is up. It's completely different metaphor. Sand and dust are not the same things. Sand on the seashore, first of all, it's grains, and I mean, it would be insane to try to count sand on a seashore, but it could theoretically be done. You can't count dust. It is a more attractive image, I think. And maybe, just maybe, it brings in an awareness of the ocean, which is blue. And that makes a poetic pair with the stars of the sky, which is blue. So now we have a kind of poetic coherence to this blessing, which would not be there so much if God had repeated afar haaretz, the dust of the earth.
But these blessings do not have any, they're not time related. So this is what I've noticed, the blessings and, you know, everything that you've written here, there's no time on it. So therefore, when does this
Right.
revelation take place, if it ever does, or is it a continuous God in motion preparing us for future, and
Yes.
just saying that we'll be here all the time?
Yes, yes. And I think to overly analyze each metaphor is to do it an injustice. It really is a broad message that you'll be here. Don't worry about it. It's a kind of don't be anxious message. Okay, let's go to the next one. Descendants shall seize the gates of their foes. And Marge, if you could move that up just a tad. Other way, back. No, not the whole page. No. Just to so I can see the top of the second page. Second page. Next page. Yeah, we want to see the text in red. Okay, there you go. Perfect. Okay. There's really very little difference between these two statements, except for Sha'ar Oevav and Sha'ar Sonav. And in the English translation, we're at a little disadvantage here because they use the same word to translate both foes. They both mean enemies or foes, but a soné, someone who hates you. It has the word hatred in it. They both mean enemies, so I don't know that it's that significant a distinction. Anybody else comments about this one?
I find it very strange that Rebecca was the only one to be mentioned, and none of us and our other siblings were not mentioned. Why was she sort of the only one mentioned? Is it for a certain reason?
Yes, this was from the scene when Abraham's servant Eliezer had gone to find a wife for Yitzchak, and Lavan, her brother, and their mother blessed her before she leaves.
But
So-
again, the story unfolds into the fact 7 years, then
Yeah,
et cetera, and then who became the favorite and who became the one of our forefathers. Avram Yitzchak, it wasn't Esau, but it was Avram Yitzchak, and then Yisrael or Yaakov, as follows. I find it very difficult that our matriarchs were not mentioned in the same, it seems to be in the same vein as our patriarchs, which is very, very surprising, because you read the Torah and it tells you how great and wise our matriarchs were, and the matriarchs controlled basically various different things that were going on in the Torah and the dialogue that we have today. If Sarah wouldn't have done certain things and Leah wouldn't have done certain things, and et cetera, we wouldn't be where we are. So the controlling element has never been given the recognition that maybe it should have done.
I wouldn't say never. I mean, we now have prayer books that include the
Yeah, but it's
Imam.
only one branch of Judaism. Maybe it should be every branch of, yeah, maybe it should be every branch, but
Actually, 3 or 4 Reconstructionists. And anyway, let's move on to the next one on the next page, because I look at that a little more closely. All right. So from Genesis 12, I will bless those who bless you and curse him that curses you. Notice the difference, plural, bless those and curse him, singular. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you, singular. V'nivrechu v'cha. But in Genesis 22, at the end of the Akedah story, this is reformulated. All the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants. So we have 2 notable differences here. One is the people who are doing the blessing. Here, it's the families of the earth, kol mishpachot ha'adamah, and here it's the nations of the earth, kol goyei ha'aretz. Why? The Genesis 22 story, the Akedah, is about a tiny part of a family, of father and son. It's only 2 people on the top of that mountain. If anything is an intimate family story, it's the Akedah. And it's the Akedah that gets this idea that the nations of the earth, suddenly it becomes a story about nations. So the Akedah story, by implication in this blessing, suddenly resonates at a national or international level. But what I want to focus on with the help of Rashi is how curious it is that the source of blessing changes as well. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you, meaning Avraham, one person in Genesis 12. But at the end of the Akedah, all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants. Who are Avraham's intended descendants here? The children of Yitzchak, who almost, of course, died in this scene. All right, so here I summarize it. The persons who will be admired by the world's people changes from Avram in Genesis 12 to Avram's descendants in Genesis 22. What will that look like? So Rashi says, commenting on this verse, Genesis 12, verse 3, there are many explanations of this, but its plain meaning is a man says to his son, Tehei ke Avraham, be like Abraham. Total stranger says, My job is complete as your parent if you resemble Abraham at the end of the day. And we can, in viewing this blessing, at the end of the Akedah story, extend Rashi's teaching this way. The people of the world will say to their children in the future, be like Abraham's descendants. Be like the Jews. That will spell success in God's eyes, according to this blessing, according to Rashi. Okay, let's go on to the next page. So I mentioned before that Genesis 22, the blessing is a composite of other sources. So we're going to look at those thematically for one very specific reason. The biblical text quoted or paraphrased at the end of Genesis 22, at the end of the Akedah story, are not organized chronologically, which would be quoting chapters 12, 13, 15, and 24 in that order. Instead, they're organized out of chronological order, which had to be intentional. Assuming this choice may have a thematic purpose, we're going to speculate on what the themes are. So this is my speculation. You're welcome to add yours. Two blessings promise survival and thriving, expressed as numerous children who are compared to numberless stars and sands. Margie, can you move down to the first footnote? I just want to. Okay. So using two images where one would have sufficed, stars and sands, hints at the idea that people possess both heavenly and earthly attributes symbolized by stars and sands. Okay, so if we are going to be, it's not just our numbers, but that we have heavenly and earthly attributes in balance somehow. Okay, now this one that has bugged some of us. The next blessing, you'll seize the gates of your foes, right? Promises future military victory. We can read this literally as military prowess or in physical strength, taking the form of aggression or self-defense. Or we can read it more figuratively, which is how I prefer to read it, as a metaphor for security or for the self-confident use of power. And before someone says, Lily, you're so politically correct, which I am by nature, I admit it. I want to show you what a 16th century rabbi, the Kli Yakar of Shlomo Ephraim of Lunchitz, did with the original text, not the original, but the source of this text in the Rebecca story in Genesis 24. He says, we'll seize the gates of their foes. This language was also said to Abraham in Genesis 22, which we're studying. Now look what he does. This is completely wild. For such is the quality of chesed, of loving kindness, that its practitioners have many friends, meaning the practitioners of love, of chesed, of kindness. Abraham practiced love and kindness toward those near and far, as did Rebecca. Remember, she goes to the well many times to give water to Eliezer and his camels. That's how he knows she's a suitable wife for Yitzchak, right? So Abram practiced love and kindness, as did Rivka. So naturally, they will seize the gates of their foes, for they have many friends who will stand with them in their hour of trouble. He's taken something about militarism and turned it into, oh, well, they're so beloved that they have many allies and friends who will defend them and come to their aid. So I'm not alone in reading this less than military prowess and physical strength, but more along these more figurative lines. Now, who's going to argue with me? Somebody here will argue with me. Yes? No? Okay. And the last blessing, quoting chapter 12, promises blessedness, that other people will bless their children by speaking of us. So it promises that we will sort of radiate blessedness and good influence in the world, predicting that future people of the earth will see Abraham's heirs, meaning us, as examples for their children to emulate. Should only be so. So here's my summary of the themes of this blessing: survival and thriving, security and power, being admired by and seen as good spiritual influence on the world's people. Okay. Let's go to the next page, unless there are questions here.
Sylvia has her hand up, Lily.
Sylvia, go.
Yeah. I just want to say that this is really pretty interesting because, in fact, we've been beaten several times. We don't have a lot of military victories. Most famous is the destruction of both temples, and on and on. And so I suppose you could read it as a metaphor for security, but I think it's more of a, if that's the case, it would be more of a security that we are one people and that we're all together and we are going to always be standing, even though we're defeated as much.
And how many of us had elaborate security plans for Rosh Hashanah in our synagogues today?
Absolutely.
I mean, really, the more emails I got about security plans in my synagogue, the more nervous I became about going there at all. I went, of course, and I went dafka. If you recall, when the Pittsburgh shooting happened 5 years ago, and people flocked to their synagogues. We had 1,300 people sitting in shul that next day to gather together to make a statement. You want to mess with us? We're going to rally to each other and to our Jewish institutions.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next page. How am I doing for time, Marcia?
You're doing good. You have about 20 more minutes or maybe more.
I got to move quick now. Okay. So the blessing that, this is purely Lily, the blessing that was given first in the Bible in Genesis 12, right, about being a good influence, being people blessing themselves or their children by referring to us or to Abraham, is now revised and placed at the end of the new blessing in Genesis chapter 22. This deliberate achronology of borrowed sources suggests that survival, thriving, security, and power, while important, are not enough. The blessing of spiritual worthiness and being an inspiration to others is essential to Abraham's legacy. It is the last divine word of the Akedah story. The last quoted blessing suggests the potential of Abraham's descendants to live admirable lives. Perhaps this is one reason we read the Akedah story on Rosh Hashanah, which was Sheila's question back at the very beginning. In its concluding divine words, we are charged to be a good influence in the world in every generation, not just in our founding prophets' generation. We can use the high holy days when we read the Akedah story to consider whether we have been a good influence on other people in the past year and how we can be a good role model in the new year. We can think seriously about whether people we do not know will remark to their children, be like Sylvia, be like Sheila, be like Alex, be like Marcia, be like Donna, be like Diane, be like them. Are people saying that about me? I don't know. Okay. So thinking back on this sequence of blessings, which of these blessings do we need the most right now? Survival, thriving, security, power, spiritual worthiness. And so when I formulated this way, I thought back to Intro to Psychology back in my freshman year of college and learning about Abe Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So next page, please. There's Abe. He's so cute. He looks like Harpo Marx to me. Okay. I don't know how many of you remember this from your Intro to Psych class, but there's a very good summary here. This 5-stage model, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, can be divided into deficiency needs, the bottom ones, and the top level known as being needs. Deficiency needs arise due to deprivation and are said to motivate people when they are unmet. Also, the motivation to fulfill such needs will become stronger the longer the duration they're denied. For example, the longer a person goes without food, the more hungry they will become. Okay. Maslow initially stated that individuals must satisfy lower level deficit needs before progressing on to meet needs like self-actualization and creativity, etc. However, it later clarified that satisfaction of a need is not an all or none phenomenon, admitting that his earlier statements may have given the false impression that a need must be satisfied 100% before the next need emerges. Rather, he concluded, when a deficit need has been more or less satisfied, it will go away, and our activities become habitually directed towards meeting the next set of needs that we've yet to satisfy. These become our salient needs. However, and this is the real essence for me, growth needs, creativity, self-actualization, continue to be felt and may even become stronger once they have been engaged. And where do we put spiritual growth in this hierarchy? If you could move it up a little bit so we can see the whole thing. To me, I'd put it up here. However, if you think about your affiliation with Jewish Collaborative or with a synagogue or with another Jewish organization, there are other needs that are being met. If you're hungry at Kiddush, your need for food is being satisfied every Shabbos. But more seriously, your feeling of belonging to a community, even your self-esteem. I got an aliyah to the Torah today. Can you believe it? Azoi. And this notion that our spiritual needs might fit in this segment here, and this idea that growth needs continue to be felt and may even become stronger once they have been engaged. Well, Shimon HaTzadik taught in Pirkei Avot, Al Shlosha Dvarim ha'olam omed, the world stands on 3 things: Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim, learning and service of God through worship and acts of loving kindness. has it been your experience that once you engage in learning, once you engage in meaningful prayer experience, once you engage in acts of loving kindness, that your need to continue to do them and to do them in a more effective, more satisfying, more rich, more loving, more engaging, more widespread way grows? It should. Okay, so now we get.
This is Sheila. So
Yeah.
I took a class, I can't remember, I think it might have been Rabbi Ariel Berger, who is one of the 4 teachers who, out of Brandeis, who continues the work of Elie Wiesel.
Yeah.
And he was talking about Maslow in regard to survival in the camps. I believe it was he who said, he goes, in that circumstance or other, you have to invert Maslow's needs and start with spirituality, because it's a haunting question in a way.
Yes, because all your other needs for Dafka were never met, were abused, were brutalized.
So that was another interesting conversation. And I apologize, I have to go meet with a student teacher, but thank you so
sorry,
much.
Okay, nice to see you, Gemar Tov. Sylvia.
Yes, thank you. I agree with what you're saying, but in some of the work that I've done in my life, I have found that people who are deprived of their basic needs, food, water, warmth, rest, blah, 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 many of them have very spiritual connections.
Yes.
And as they start to get, and I think you're correct, as people start to get fed and they get better in their life, they get their feet on the ground.
Yes.
That can go one of 2 ways.
Right. And Jewish history bears
the other way.
Jewish history bears that out. Jews have been impoverished for much longer than they've been financially successful. And yet we've maintained and developed extraordinary spiritual resources. And I see Alex has his hand up, and then I really want to get to that last page, which brings it all together. Go, Alex. Yes.
I get disappointed. I mean, in the 3 pillars that we stand on, Allah Torah, Allah Vadav, whichever way you want to look at it, always seems that the poor relative is prayer. And again, I feel the rabbis are not doing what they should be doing, because in the world that I live in, so to speak, it's Chumash. It's about Chumash Rashi, learning Gemara. When it comes to prayers, it's Al Chapa Mincha, Al Chapa Mariv, Al Chapa. Using the word Chap is so disrespectful of understanding Dalit Miata Omed, and that upsets me so much.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, let's go to the right here. If we apply Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, the blessings of Genesis 22, we can ask, what are your most wished for blessings this year? Are you and those you love most focused on survival, on thriving, on security, on your personal effectiveness, your confident use of power or your own agency, or on your spiritual worthiness? And of course, you can be most focused on a number of things at the same time, but I think it helps us to try to understand ourselves in these terms. So if we go to the last page, I've fleshed out this question, and I want to give you time to take notes. I'm going to read the questions in each grouping and wait a minute and just ask you to highlight for yourself any words that I read that either really say, I must follow up on that, or this really upset me. Either one, because that is a signal between you and yourself that it's something you want to pay attention to in these Aseret Yemei Tshuva. So section 1, God's blessing in Genesis 22:18 expresses the promise that Avram's heirs, including us, will be regarded by others as worthy of emulation. Am I worthy of emulation? How do I know? Am I the best person to assess this? Who can help me assess my spiritual qualities? Is there someone I trust to discuss this with me? Take a minute. Okay, that's a short minute, but this document is available to download, so don't feel you have to scribble notes too frantically. Okay, someone already raised this question. Do we want the admiration of the people of the world? When are other people's opinions of us important and valuable? And when are they a distraction or destructive? The next question I wrote initially during the COVID pandemic, but I think it's still true. Our world faces some unprecedented political and natural challenges today. While living through these acute stressors, do we aspire to more than survival? To thriving? To security? To self-confident use of power? To spiritual worthiness? Who are the great role models for our highest aspirations in times of trouble? Number 4. Where are my loved ones on the Genesis 22 hierarchy of blessings? Survival, thriving, security, power, spiritual worthiness. Which blessings do they seek? Which blessings do they need? Number 5. Must God's blessings always be earned? What is the role of God's chen, God's grace, in our lives? Which of my blessings of the past year have felt earned, and which have felt like God's unexpected grace? Number 6, I'm all too aware of the time frame here. Okay. Which avenues for doing good are newly open to me now, and which have closed or are more limited now? What is the current mitzvah landscape in my community? How exactly will I do good in the new year? And last but not least, when we think about Judaism as a sacred legacy, we often focus on being good heirs of a received tradition. Activist Dina Robinson recently said, "I want to be a good ancestor one day." how can we all become good ancestors? I see I have a lot in the chat. Okay. So are we totally out of time, Marcy? We are, right?
You can go a little more if you'd like,
Okay.
if people want to talk.
So I want to hear reactions, and I also want to ask you just to put in the chat if there is one of these questions, just by number, one of these topic areas that really resonated with you the most. So if you just put 1, 6, 7, whatever it is, I'd be interested. Okay, but any sort of general comments or anything.
I have a Lily, when you studied this, because I think did you teach this at a was it a Tikkun Leil Shavuot? When did you teach it?
I taught it for Slichot a year ago,
Okay.
Conservative Movement Slichot program.
Did you get any answers that surprised you? Because
I didn't ask. I didn't ask that question. I was like, I should have asked that. Yeah.
We are constantly taught that we are going to be a light unto the nations, or we are a light unto other nations. With the questions and the 7 categories that you put them in, they all are connected in my humble opinion to that similar vein, whichever way you look at it, because of the progression and understanding, ancestry, continual adore from generation to generation. So we are told what to do, we're told what we should be expected to do because of who we are. Isn't that a huge burden to put on us as a nation? Are we worthy of it? Can we uphold God's will? Very, very heavy burden.
Very tiny question there.
Sorry, Lily.
I know. Well, I really do think this, that we have a prayer, Ava Rabbah, and the Avat Olam. We say them before the Shema, morning and evening. And what is the expression of God's love, God's great love, or God's eternal love? That God gives us laws. It doesn't sound very...
etc. Yeah.
So that doesn't sound very cozy or warm and fuzzy. It is a set of expectations and standards and guidance without which we would be, I believe, in a certain amount of chaos. And that's not to say that other people that aren't Jews are in chaos. They have their own ways of understanding the universe and developing ethics and ways of being in community. But this happens to be ours. So yes, it's a great burden, but it's also a privilege. And it's also, I don't know how I would confront my existential angst without Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Do I want to sit in shul for 5 hours in a row? Not always. But
then when we are blessed by parents bless their children, they are not use Avram Yitzchak Yaakov as a man, they use Ephraim and Manasseh. And again, when a blessed a girl, or you bless your daughters, it's again, what the usage and the people that are quoted as a blessing to be like is not Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Leah as such. It's a different ballgame. So why was one chosen to be blessed like, as opposed to what we're talking about, our heritage or our covenant between God and man? It's a conflict.
I'm afraid it's a whole different class, but I
Yeah.
would say the burden is lightened by the fact of human creativity and human diversity. And we have the Torah Shebichtav and the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is a model for us that we have the Torah that we have received, and we also have the Torah that we generate ourselves, at least in the progressive movements, that I want to hear the Torah of each of you. And the rabbi at the shul I go to says to every bar mitzvah, so-and-so has chanted the Torah of Moshe and the Torah of whoever the Torah was from, Yeshayahu. Now we're going to hear his Torah. So is that a responsibility? Yes. Is it a burden? Maybe. It's also, wow, an opportunity. So glass half full, half empty. Well, I'm going to give Sylvia has her hand up.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful class. Yes, is it a burden? Of course, but I think that many of us, and I see for myself and also through readings of Eli Wiesel and Viktor Frankl, that the worst of times can generate the spiritual growth that gets us to the next step, and often more than the best of times.
Yes, totally agree. And I see Diane had a question. It is a larger question, but I do want to mention a quick answer to define grace. We have it in the Amida of every weekday. God graces us with knowledge. Chonen hada'at. That is one way in which we experience God's grace in daily life, to be able to differentiate between what is sacred and what is mundane. And so I guess that is probably a really good place to stop by saying, I wish for you all a Gemar Chatima Tova, and that you have the privilege of being in a shul with wonderful rabbis and cantors and wonderful community, and that God is gracious to you in the coming year.
Thank you
for a beautiful class.
for class. And a perfect way to, first of all, I just want to say that today is the 3rd of